It's a Hillary Clinton.
All right. Welcome back. We have two topics to get through today. So the first one we're going to talk about is Sooc, S-O-O-C. It means straight out of camera. And the huge perk that I've talked to you about repeatedly is the better it is in camera, less editing time, right? Minimize editing time. So if you've ever been online and you've seen pictures that have S-O-O-C stamped at the bottom, that's what it means, straight out of camera. They've done no editing to it, and they're showing you that and telling you that for a reason. When you see that, the idea is not, here's a picture of the person straight out of the camera, and here's the glamour shot that I did. This is how much prettier and skinnier and brighter I made her. The goal here is not to go from crap to awesome. The goal of Sooc is to be as perfect as possible out of camera so that your finished product hardly looks any different, and it shouldn't because you got it so right in camera. Okay, that's the goal. All right, so getting good at this requires a lot more practice, a lot more patience, and you have to change your mindset. That whole, I'll fix it later in Photoshop, I'll take care of that later. You got to get rid of that. You got to think, I need to get this right in camera. Pretend that you're a film photographer back in the day. You've got 12 exposures on your camera. You got to get it right, correct? You need to get it right in camera and be done with it because Photoshop doesn't even exist and you're going to develop it and you have to get it done. So some tips for getting good at this, and it's going to make you a better photographer all the way around. One tip is to bracket your shots. Hopefully some of you looked on your camera when you did that worksheet to see if your camera had bracketing. And we talked about exposure compensation. Bracketing is a subset of that where you keep your exposure perfect in the middle, but then you tell it to take another shot that's a third, two-thirds, or a full stop brighter, or a third, two-thirds, or a full stop darker. You pick one of those numbers. Typically it's a third or two-thirds, just a little brighter or a little darker. And if your camera works in one way, you hold down your shutter, especially if you're in burst mode, it goes ch-ch-ch, and it automatically does all three of those settings real fast. So you get, you know, if the wind's blowing, you get almost the exact same picture because it's so fast. If you don't have that option, you have to manually depress your shutter 3 times in a row. But in the old film days, this was very common. They take what they thought was the perfect exposure, and then they take one a little brighter and a little darker. Hopefully, one of those 3, when you're done with it, is perfect, and you don't have to do any editing. Okay? So it's not a big swing, it's just a little bit up or down in brightness. This is going to help ensure that you get a decent shot, and in Photoshop you can load all the shots on different layers and then carefully erase or mask out over different ones to bring in parts of all 3 exposures that you prefer. Or we could do the HDR processing that we're going to do in a later class, where we use software, HDR software, to blend and meld all 3 photos into the best or the specific look that we want. Another tip is to shoot in that burst mode if you have it. It helps ensure that you have at least one properly focused shot, and it really captures the moment. So of these shots of this little girl, by shooting in that burst mode and getting a bunch of them, you know, one might be the perfect shot, or maybe the whole series turned out to be perfect. You've got them all. Another advantage of burst mode is that in Photoshop you could combine them and create something that doesn't exist in real life. So if you're on a tripod and the only thing that's changing in each shot is where the snowboarder is, you can stack them all up and mask out different layers and get something pretty cool. Shoot in aperture priority mode. On a day-to-day basis, I would tell you guys this is the mode you should be in. You're deciding what your story is by the depth of field. Typically, we only switch over to shutter priority when we're thinking about, is our goal to freeze motion or to blur motion? Other than that, for the most part, you're going to want to think about how you set up your shot based on depth of field. So from an f2.0, we get a lot of blur, only this front side of the tomato is in focus and it starts to go out, versus an f8, most everything is in focus. So we're telling our story. A couple other examples. If this is what you're looking at in your yard and you think it's pretty, that's a pretty ugly shot overall, right? With everything crystal clear in focus. But if you change your depth of field and you focus in on just this purple flower and you let everything else blur out, that's a more pleasing photo. And again, deciding what's in focus, what's not, is how you tell the story. Another tip is to take lots and lots and lots of shots. When you're doing Sooc or straight out of camera, you don't want to go out and take 10 shots and assume that one of the 10 of them is going to be perfect. That's pretty risky. Why not shoot 100? What's the difference on digital, right? Doesn't matter. So the more shots you take, the better the risk. You know, some of these aren't so good. Anybody do shots of animals and they walked out of the shop this week? Yeah. So, you know, you get a shot like that where your animal is leaving. And tip 5, this might be the one that takes the most practice and patience. Take your time when you're composing the shot. Check your horizon lines. We talked about that. If you go out and take a picture of the lake, make sure it's level, not tipped, because you're not going to fix it in Photoshop. Check your depth of field. Are you telling the story that you want to tell? Is your aperture set in a way that tells the story you want? Look for balance. Use that grid of 3s in those 4 intersection points and put your subject matter in one of those intersection points. Have a strong subject matter. Have something in the picture that's obviously the subject. Slow down, have patience, and capture the moment and take a ton of pictures. So here's some examples of Sooc. And again, you're not going to see much difference. Look at your monitor because it's going to be better than up here. But can you see, this is straight out of camera, minimal editing to this one. You shouldn't see much difference at all. Like this shot's darn good, right? Do you see where there's a little difference maybe?
A little bit of contrast looking at the fence post.
Okay, yep.
Darker, a little darker.
Yep. Any other thing you guys see?
Bird dresses.
There's no SOOC.
Yep, that top one is stamped with that. How about on the girl's face and skin? Yeah, it's a little bit lighter, a little bit brighter, but not much difference, and that's what we want to see. This is not, here's a crappy photo and look how good I am in Photoshop, I fixed it. This is, look how good of a photographer I am. Right on the spot, straight out of camera. All right, how about these?
Put a bowl of fur.
Sure. No choice, put a baby in a bowl of fur. So the biggest difference in this one is they cropped it a little tighter and the person's foot is out of it. But that's kind of it. It's a darn good shot straight out of camera. And if you are a newborn photographer and your time is money, you don't want to spend 4 hours editing one client's shots. You want to get it right in camera. Go in, tweak it a little bit, you're done. Move on. All right. This is straight out of camera. This is edited, and the biggest thing that they did here was use the rules that we learned with portrait photography, right? Where the eyes go up in that top third or fourth so that we don't have so much dead space up top. So it's really just a cropping issue, a little bit brighter. Down here we have Sooc on the right, edited on the left, a little brighter, but a pretty good shot in camera, and that's your bottom line goal. So your assignment for next week, one of them, is to take lots and lots and lots of pictures of any topic, any subject, landscapes, people, still lifes, whatever. But you need to shoot specifically with the mindset of straight out of camera. I'm getting this perfect in camera. I will not crop. I will not color correct. I will not recompose. I will not do anything in Photoshop. And then you're going to give me your best 2 examples. You're going to print them out. And you're going to include what we've done all along so far. Photo caption, where, and when taken. Then you're going to tell me all the composition principles you used and why it was important, and how you set up your camera and why. So some of you have started doing all the details, like here's my f-stop, here's my shutter speed, here's my white balance, here's my center meter weighting. That's fine, but I want you to tell me why. Like, I specifically went into aperture priority mode and selected an f-stop of 4, and I knew it was important to use center weighted metering to get the right picture because this is what I wanted. So explain your whys. Even if your pictures aren't good, if your explanations are strong, that's how you get your points. Okay? Also, bring those digital files and the portraits that you did today. I talked about having those with you going forward so that we can edit them going forward. So it's just a printout, but you are going to have access to the digitals, and we're probably going to tweak them next week. So any questions on this part of the assignment? Any subject matter, but it's going to be awesome in camera. It's going to look fantastic. Okay.